Welcome to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership. I'm Aarti Shah, and I'm joined by my co-host, Bill Coletti. And this is where we talk to agency owners about their methods, milestones, and mistakes in their creative leadership journey. So welcome to episode 10.
Hard to believe.
I can't believe it, Bill, right?
Hard to believe. It's awesome, isn't it?
Yes, I know. I remember when this was just a dream. And here we are.
Just an idea. Absolutely.
Yes. So this is, as we like to call it, our sort of thematic recap. You and I are just going to discuss some of the themes that just keep popping up in all of these conversations, and just sort of give our take on it.
I love it.
And yeah, and so, we're the ones that have really come to mind are, we're going to reflect a little bit on these interviews, and Bill and I, so I hope you guys will, find this interesting, and we'll be able to tie it back to some leadership, suggestions. But, just really reflecting on how we interact with our guests and the kinds of questions we ask. We're going to talk a little bit about work-life balance because, my gosh, that's come up pretty much in every single episode. And I would love to look at it from two angles, right? From, as a leader, how do you ensure that you are, taking care of yourself, but also what does that look like and mean for your team? And then I don't think we have enough time to give this as much attention as I would like, but let's touch on DEI because it's come up a few times in a few of our conversations now.
Sounds great.
So, but before we do that, we have our heartbeats and science experiments, which we can't neglect. So, Bill, I'm going to open it up to you to tell us what is making your heart beat and what are you experimenting on.
I love it.
Since we last spoke.
So, as a still an active owner of my firm, my heartbeat is honestly relates back to work-life balance. And so my mom is 89 and she's slowing down, and, it depends upon which clinician you talk to. She's kind of failing and running out of gas. And I have been so fortunate because of the way I constructed my firm and constructed my life that I stopped traveling as much as I had been previously. So I get to spend a lot of time with her. And I was a single dad for a while and was her primary caregiver for three amazing women, my two daughters and my mom, and then got remarried. And my wife has now engaged so much with both my girls, but they've moved on, but also my mom. And so my heartbeat is a focus on, in this stage of relationship with my mom, of working more and being more successful isn't really what matters right now. It's about how can I ask her better questions and how can I learn more about our family. And my dad was the great storyteller and he passed away some years ago, but Mom, you got to work a little bit harder to extract a good story out of my mom, but they come, but you just got to work a little bit harder. So my heartbeat is a real focus on asking good questions and asking good questions of my mom. And I think that's a thematic that we may talk about today a little bit further, but it's about asking questions.
I wonder if, you were also a grandparent now, right? I wonder how this is all sort of threading together as you look at your grandchild kind of coming into life, and you look at your mother as she's sort of in her sort of sunset, right? And how you want to sort of continue that thread. I mean, is that part of the thinking? Is you want to make sure that your grandchild knows, your parents as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done a good job with my daughters of doing that because they have a grandma and grandpa experience with my mom and dad. But we've also tried to share with them some of their professional successes because both of them had really successful professional careers in kind of communications adjacent careers. And so we've tried to share those stories both from family legacy, but also successes and business ventures that my mom and dad have had. So I definitely want to continue doing that as a grandfather on both sides of that. And it's ironic work life is that I really want to be able to talk about both of those.
Is that informing your experiment? Has that sort of shown up in some kind of experiment in your life?
My experiment is not directly related to that. It's more directly related to life. And it's a truly legitimate science experiment. And so I invested in one of the Aura rings here recently to sort of measure my sleep and get some data about sleep. And so have been very focused on sleep for the past 6 weeks. And so come Monday, this is the middle of the week, but come Monday, I'm going to do an experiment of eating a larger lunch and a much smaller dinner, and maybe even just a high protein shake for dinner, and see how that impacts sleep. So that's my science experiment. I'm going to do 2 weeks of that and see what impact that has. It's going to be hard because we do a lot of entertaining and we love spending time with friends. And so I'll see if I can pull it off, but it's basically larger lunch, smaller dinner.
So when you're talking about sleep, again, this just ties so much into I think what the bigger conversation we're going to have today. I mean, is your issue? Do you have a hard time falling asleep? Is that or staying asleep? What's the challenge that you've been having to grapple with around sleep?
It's waking up too early and being ready to go. I have no problem going to sleep, and I stay asleep. Early part's better, but it's a energy and an enthusiasm to go ask my mom questions. It's an energy and enthusiasm to talk to the owners that we talk to. So I think that's the bigger issue that I have is a staying asleep because I'm excited. I'm excited to go do cool stuff.
So Bill, as I go into my beats and experiments, I think there's some parallel paths that we are on, and sleep has been something that I've been really prioritizing lately. So I recently came across, and it's came out a few years ago, but it's called Happier Hour by Cassie Holmes. And it's this idea, it's the idea of time affluence, right? And how that's directly correlated with our happiness. And our happiness is really determined not by what we're doing, but sort of really how we're spending the minutes of our days, right? And there are ways that they found that I think that there are three things that they said that make us the least happy, and that's commuting, housework, and working. And the things that make us most happy and most energized is really time connecting with other people. And I think we talked about that a little bit last time. The other thing I really like about it is they talk about turning the routine into rituals, right? The things that we really take for granted because we just think they're going to be there forever, but actually do bring us joy, kind of ritualizing them so we can savor them. But this really resonated with me because I think time affluence is something that I've always prioritized in my life. I always want a balance of financial, stability and prosperity, but with time affluence. And that's something that's just been a priority for my whole life. And so to see that sort of validated in terms of how much joy that can bring us was really, it sort of reinforced my commitment to that. And then that really directly correlated with my experiment was I realized how much time I am spending on these dumb devices, right? And they're not dumb, they're very smart. They're too smart. And part of it is work, and which is fine, but then you're just like, oh, I need to check this WhatsApp because this parent group, oh, we got a school thing. Oh, and then you're like, oh God, maybe I haven't looked at Instagram today or whatever it is. And sometimes even right before till the moment I go to bed, I feel like I've had my phone out. So I have instituted a bunch of controls on my phone.
There's time limits. I didn't know there was time limits.
Yes. The time limits. I cannot access my phone after, I cannot access any of my apps after a certain hour. So, and that plus being very much more intentional about reading, and actually been writing more in physical notebooks so that I'm not constantly in front of a screen all the time. So that's been my experiment. And part of it is sleep. It's driven by sleep. It's I don't need to be scrolling on my phone until the moment I'm in bed.
And the thing the yes and to that, and I just hope everybody listening that owns a firm, that they think about these things. It's not about, we're not talking about P&L or profit share programs, but it's things that really matter, I think, in your life, is this distinction between lifespan and health span. I think that's been a neat conversation that I've just thought a lot about here recently. Because I see it with my mom, is that she's having a nice long life, but her health is not where she wants it to be. And so it's a very clear distinction. So I hope everybody thinks about that kind of stuff.
Yes. And because people will sometimes say, well, we're all going to die, right? But it's yeah, but how do you want to live? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
the question, right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that is a good segue into work-life balance and whatever the heck that is.
Yeah. And so I'm going to just immediately connect this back to Happier Hour, right? I mean, how intentional we spend our time, and how that correlates directly to our happiness, and that commuting and time working are ranked pretty high on what people consider to be kind of a drain. And the commuting piece, just, I mean, and there's been so much research that shows like the detrimental effects that commuting has on your physical health, not just your mental health. So, I just, a, I understand that, a lot of firms, they are trying to find some sort of middle ground in between like having a fully distributed workforce and then having folks in office. And, PR Week recently did their agency business report, and they had a section where they said either in office, fully remote, mandatory hybrid, and then non-mandatory hybrid. And that non-mandatory hybrid is what I am most interested in, and what I honestly think is the future. Is, mandates don't work for many reasons, according to most of the data that's out there. So I think that is a really important element, a piece of this work-life balance, is really thinking about what you're expecting of your employees in terms of commutes and time spent just getting to work.
Yeah, I do. I think we'll see how all that sorts out. I think we've been remote for a long time, and remote just sort of works. And there's and I think that hybrid approach is the future. I think there's a reason for being. If there's a reason for convening, we should convene. Mm-hmm. The thing I'm curious your take on is maybe a more of a meta level on work-life balance at an individual level, and is it at an owner's level, and share two kind of provocative thoughts on work-life balance. People that talk about work-life balance are people that have already succeeded. And that at the early days of entrepreneurship, in the early days when I started my firm, is that I was obsessed. It's all I did. It is all I focused on. I traveled. I went an extra day to do business meetings and prospecting meetings before I had a client meeting. I would travel to I'd travel to a conference that I probably didn't have any reason to go to. I was reading. I was creating content. I mean, I was just obsessed and didn't have balance, and wasn't in a good place of, great caregiving for my kids and great caregiving for my daughter or for my mom. I was really just obsessed with growing and building a business that then served into that, getting to that level where I wanted to be at a lifestyle level. And so, is it a luxury to be able to talk about work-life balance as an entrepreneur building and growing a firm? And it's easy to look backwards and sort of reminisce and have that now. But it takes an obsession. It takes manic focus. It takes 60-hour weeks to build and grow something that's really meaningful. And that's what the early part of your career is for. I mean, that's when we're not sleeping a lot, not eating well. And is that okay?
So I absolutely want to validate that there is a phase of life where there is your physical needs may not be the same, right, as later, like, and the demands on your time are not going to be the same. I mean, I remember I had jobs.
Parenting is a big part of that.
Yeah. And I had, I as well worked in DC as a, Beltway reporter in my mid 20s. And I remember drinking espressos at 8 p.m. to like work on stories till midnight. And it was fun, honestly. Like, we had a great time. But I do, I mean, there is research that shows, right, that working after there are diminishing returns. And while we do live in this culture where we are convinced ourselves that we need to be working all the time and we're going to be more productive, the data doesn't bear that out. Like, rest and relaxation is actually good for everybody at all levels of the organization, from the top all the way through. And a few years ago, when there was this emphasis on mental health and, kind of showing up authentically, and kind of people not having to go to the bathroom and cry, where they could actually like say, hey, look, like, I need a break from this. I need to step away. I need to go for a walk. And how that actually, I mean, that I would argue that maybe that would make you a better entrepreneur if you didn't buy into this idea that in order to be successful, you have to neglect every other aspect of your life, in your physical and your mental health.
But in that moment, am I willing to take that chance? I know the path is trodden with generations of, Lutheran work ethic. There's not much, anecdotal data about folks that didn't do that. So I worry about taking the chance.
Well, so yes, but I think maybe, and again, it's like, again, I don't want to conflate like working hard and, working 80-hour weeks, but really like just taking that moment to ask yourself, like, would I be better off just going to sleep right now? What is it that
That's
there's an
great.
adage, right?
Yeah.
Like if you feel like everybody hates you, you should probably go to sleep. And if you hate everybody else, you should probably eat something. Like just being tuned in to like at what point is me firing off another 10 emails really going to add that much more
Mm-hmm.
value? Or am I better off calling it? And actually my husband is actually really good about this because he will ask me that sometimes when I'm working late. He's like, are you really like is this really necessary, or would you be better served by sleeping and showing up your best? And I think we brought this up that there's data that shows that if you lack of sleep actually impairs your brain in the same way that drinking does. So if
Absolutely.
you really are going to show up at work with 4 hours of sleep, would you be willing to show up drunk? Do you think that would make you?
Yeah,
Like,
it
do
would
you think
make
that
it
makes for a
no
good
different.
leader,
Yeah.
a good entrepreneur? So I think just we need to be more in tuned with our bodies and our needs and not neglect them, because there may be some short-term wins on the back of that. And that's not to say there's not going to be periods, right? There might be like a 2 week sprint or something
That's the
where
smarter
you've
way
got
to
to,
do it.
yes, but
Build
no, but
sprints.
bake exactly. But that shouldn't be what I would love to see us to do is to move away from that being the norm. And anecdotally, I've had women who have started firms, and I don't know how public they are about this. Part of the reason they started their own firms, and many of these firms are quite successful, is they were not able to listen to their own needs, be available to their families, um, working for somebody else, working at a big agency. It was
Mm-hmm.
usually a big agency environment, and they managed to become very successful entrepreneurs. Some of them were lifestyle, some of them are performance firms, sort of being able to call their own shots
Yeah.
a little bit
And
more.
that's really nice. And the other thing, as I have thought about this, is when we talk about work-life balance, my sense is we talk about it at the individual level. I want work-life balance. I am seeking work-life balance. Or like you just said, I'm going to build the culture of a firm where we're going to prioritize balance. Sometimes what I've found the challenge is with between sort of mano a mano, person to person, when my work is not in balance with your life. And so I need to get something done for a client. And if you're prioritizing life and I'm prioritizing work, it's another area for conflict in our working relationship. And so it's okay for me to balance myself. It's great to be involved in a firm that is balancing and prioritizing that. But I've had people that have bastardized the concept. When shit needs to get done, now's not the time to play your life card. Now's the time to play your work card, because stuff has got to get done. We're on a deadline and it needs to be met. And so that's the part about work-life balance that I love the concept, but when it becomes in conflict in a team or person to person, when people are on different wavelengths, that's when I see it having a real, it's been bumpy in my experience with work-life balance.
Yes, right. And I mean, we've all seen this. I remember when going back to when I was in my 20s and working at a media company in DC. None, those of us that didn't have kids and were in that,
Mm-hmm.
different phase of life, we noticed that anyone with kids, they were leaving at 3. They had,
Yeah.
they always had family commitments, and they were able to, and we were kind of annoyed that we were like, well, I mean, how come, our lives are
Their
less
life was
important?
in conflict with your work.
Yeah, exactly. And I will say that I think a lot of companies have gotten much more intentional about this, and they are no longer, you know, just allowing parents to have that flexibility, care any kind of, caretaker, whether it's your family. I mean, some folks take time off if they get a new pet, right? If they get a dog, if any dog owners know that puppies require a lot of time. Um, so yes, but I do think maybe, maybe if we diversify, like where, like how we think about work life balance and what people prioritize, maybe there could be an ebb and flow. And I do think this is where leadership does come in, right? I mean, if there is a period of time, or like say, I'm going to just use a new business pitch, for example, there is a huge new business pitch. And I do think that the leadership needs to set that expectation, right? That like, look, if you have other things going on, please let us know. And there are going to be times where it's going to conflict, right? Someone's mom will have some major surgery that they need to fly down for. But that's the beauty of our distributed world that we live in, right? You can sit in your hospital waiting room and be on your laptop.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that should be the expectation in every situation.
Yep.
But I mean, there are creative solutions. And I think if you're a leader that trusts people, people will want to, I find, and I think there's actually, there's a stick and carrot idea, and it used to be very stick, like nobody wants to work and you have to like force them to work. But the data, again, doesn't bear that out. People like to feel like they're part of something. They like to feel a sense of accomplishment. I think people like to work. I think they feel fulfilled by work. I hear that more consistently than I hear people feeling like consistently drained by it, especially for what we're in the creative services, right? If you don't like
fun
this,
stuff, it should be fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people like this is kind of a calling for people. I think it's just they want more say in how they do it, right? Like they want to know that, look, I'm going to sign off at 3:00 because I don't want to miss the soccer game, but I'll be back on at 5. Everything will get done. And I think that's to me a work-life balance culture. It's not like I'm just going to sign off at 3 and don't expect to hear from me until tomorrow morning. It's no, I'm going to sign off at 3, but don't worry, this thing will get done.
Right. And I think you said something really interesting about there is a ebb and a flow and a seasonality of some of this stuff about client demand, a campaign or a crisis or whatever the case may be. But it requires leadership, the leadership, to say, yes, we have a culture of work-life balance. However, today or now or this week or on the 15th, I need all hands on deck. And so it requires honesty and transparency, and not just falling back on lazy tropes around we're going to have a work-life balance. You gotta walk the walk, not just talk the talk, kind of thing.
I mean, I think the name, I think work-life balance, I think that term is so meaningless now because it can mean anything you want it to mean, really. And it's so subjective. And so I really think the policies that you have in place and I think this really comes down to flexibility. I mean, if somebody can throw in a load of laundry in between meetings, you just took 30 minutes, you just gave them 30 minutes back in their evenings, right? So I do think that letting people work in the way that works for them to me is really the key here. So, I mean, hopefully we're moving more in that direction with this.
I think so. I know I have plenty of my, people that look like me, that are like, use the phrase old school. I'm kind of old school. I want to be at my desk at 9:00 and I'll leave at 6 and still use that vocabulary, and talk about the benefits of doing that and the things that they get to do. We've had podcast guests that have talked about it. I'm in my office every day. I'm in my office every morning. And so I do see, as you said, I do see it changing. But I do think that there is, I want there to be space for kind of the old school crowd as well.
And that's the thing. It's like, no, right. Everybody wants to do the work, right? Like, like I don't, but at what expense, right? Like when you said that you weren't there for your, who was taking care of the kids, right? Yeah. And the way that our society works right now, women tend to be the default caretakers in those situations.
Totally.
And so they're being asked to put their financial and their professional lives on hold. So, I mean, if you can create a world in which women can participate more fully, I think that benefits everybody.
Absolutely.
And, because this is the same industry that will then complain, when the labor market is tight, they'll say, oh, well, we don't have, we can't find anybody. And it's like, well, this is the same, you told everybody they needed to be in the office from 9 to 5:30 every day. And like a huge chunk of women left the industry at that point. So, I mean, I question things and I say, well, who is this working for and who is it excluding? And I just think we're a better industry if we just create a more inclusive environment. And 9 to 5, 5 days a week doesn't work for not just moms. I mean, it doesn't work for dads. I think dads are more involved. I mean, the data shows that millennial men spend more time with their children. Like, I think it's like triple the amount of time that like their predecessors generations did. And that's a good thing. Like, society is better off for it.
Yeah. I guess my last thought on this, and we could switch to our next topic, is that I was thinking back. I found some old documents of sort of some employee lists, and we had lists, and we were sort of thinking about raises and promotions. Just when I was at the bigger agency, and we had thinking about raises and promotions. And obviously, client work was a big determinant of promotions and raises. But there was a bias for just the people that showed up. There was and I can see it now, but I favorably scored. I mean, it wasn't necessarily empirical, but we favorably scored folks that were present and folks that seemed to always have an excuse of something to do, rightly or wrongly. And I admit that perhaps is a bad management trait, but I do think that exists in the world. That I just think there's a benefit. There are people that just showing up you get credit for just showing up.
Showing up physically, right?
Yeah,
Not because right. And I mean, so it's proximity bias, and it's a real thing. And I think Helen Cupp
people get promoted because of it.
Yes, and she actually has done some really great research on this, on proximity bias, and helping companies actually unlearn this. And really sort of focusing on results and output, because we know how performative our industry can be. That person who shows up at 7 and they stay till 7, they are not necessarily the most productive person.
No, they're not the best with the client. Right.
Yeah, and in some cases you kind of wonder, like, why can you not get your work done? Yeah. And there's diminishing returns on productivity at some point, and there's a performative element to our business, and I think it's always helped extroverts a bit more. And some of the smartest people in our business are introverts, and they really benefit when the culture shifts to a results performance-based
quiet
culture.
Reflection. Absolutely. Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. Yeah. Good stuff. So work-life balance, it's a balance. It's kind of the...
Yes. I guess this is a good segue. Maybe just because we talked about women and inclusion, let's just talk about DEI for just a minute, and then we'll have the bigger conversation. So this has come up several times, and my main takeaway is that most every CEO owner would say that they make decisions based on data, right? Like data informed decision making is
a cool phrase.
Good, it's smart, right? Yeah. Well, again, I'm just going to say that I don't think you can say that and then say that, well, DEI is a nice to have in the same breath, because everything has shown that financial performance of companies are boosted by diversity at every level, but especially in the leadership team. That is, people of color, that is women. And, we are being in the creative services industry, like, we have to know our audience. And I think if you have a monolithic, workforce, you simply cannot know the audiences, all of the audiences that you are trying to reach. So it just seems like a business need. The financial performance metrics are there. So that's what I have to say about DEI.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that, and I think the data is empirical. Ideas are better informed by a more whole worldview, and where you came from. Kind of. What's the phrase of where you sit determines where you take a stand, and I think that's really critical.
I like that.
Insights on perspectives. My point, and we've talked about this before, is in the early days of your entrepreneurial journey, when you were building a firm and you were scrapping for your second and your third and your fourth client, and that may mean your second, third, and fourth employee, and you don't have a lot of systems in place and you're just trying to figure it out and you're bootstrapping it along, there are things you need and there are things you should do. I think getting diverse voices onto your teams is important, but I would argue more important is just getting somebody really good on your team to do the work. And if you're really small at a micro level, and that's my only rub about it. And we had a fabulous guest that pushed back and said, the sooner you get over that, I don't think she denied the fact that that was real. I think she said the sooner you get over that, the better off you're going to be. And so there are so many barriers, and I'm talking about small, total bootstrap quasi freelancers, basically, that are trying to become agencies. Is there are so many speed bumps, road hazards along the way. I would like to liberate people a little bit from this challenge, if possible, in the early days.
Well, I mean, it depends on what kind of business they're going after, right? I mean, if
I think they're going after business, period, at that point. They're
right. Yeah. I mean, there are certain
work.
businesses, I mean, that you simply, I mean, you look at influencer, right? And the conversations around equity, around influencers,
totally.
You can't, and even if you're trying to understand, like, we've talked about, high touch firms versus like, tactical agencies. I mean, the way that crises play out today, you need somebody in that room who speaks TikTok. Like you just need that person in the room. And you look at how diverse the creators are.
But does it need to be a person of color in this micro scenario that we're talking about? I need someone in a crisis. I've got a client. I'm basically a freelancer. I may have 1 or 2 employees. I need somebody younger, basically, is what I think you're saying. Somebody younger. Amen. Totally. Let me go find that. But do they have to be X, Y, or Z? Or can I just go find a young person who can help translate the world?
I think you will get more depth. Like, so, I mean, like in today's marketplace, I feel like, I mean, and most agencies will tell you this, right? Finding junior level talent that's diverse is not hard, right? Yeah. I mean, look at the demographics of
the world. Absolutely.
Of the country, right?
Yeah.
If you're in a major market, it's really, I mean, you almost have to go out of your way if you want to exclude. If you want an all white junior workforce, like, right? I mean, between LGBTQ, people of color, people who identify as some kind of ethnic minority group. People who, their gender pronouns, what those might be. I mean, the gender, the gender fluidity with like this younger generation is, it's something unlike, I think you and I even can wrap our heads around. So I think and I've seen this at agencies, right? I mean, the diversity at the junior level is there. Like it's there. Most like I said, I think you really have to go out of your way to probably avoid it. If you're in a major market, the question that I've always had with DEI experts is, are you retaining diverse talent and giving them sort of avenues to thrive so that they're reaching leadership? Because that's where we see the big dearth is like, the diversity at the junior level is there. And then it just sort of thins out. And then as you get to leadership, it's much more rare. But, I mean, we now, we have like, Chris Foster is, a Black man who heads OPRG.
Yep.
And actually, I wrote a piece on this when there were no women. We had no women CEOs for any of the top 10 agencies. And this is an industry. This was
when was that?
2016, 2015-ish.
10-ish years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 10 years ago. And, we are an industry that's 75 to 80% women. So what's happening between like, senior level to like making it to the C-suite. And we did like a lot of, I did a lot of investigation on that, and thankfully things did turn around. And now, we have many more women represented.
Absolutely.
Although less now because so many, some of them, exited their roles.
Yeah, they all got merged up into something else.
But no, but this is a conversation that we should keep having, and it'll come up with.
And I still have that belief that at that micro level, you have to be conscious of it. But I remember winning a major, as Kith, our small firm, winning a major bit of business against the big guys, and we won it. And I just needed people. I needed people to do the work on Monday morning. And so it's like, this is like from like a real experience of mine. When I've had extra revenue and said, okay, we can add a new vice president, I've tried to be very conscious about a diverse workforce. But that weekend, I just needed somebody Monday morning. I couldn't get it done.
But
Bill, I couldn't get the work done.
But is that person, like, does that person have to be a white dude?
I just want to be really honest. It needed to be someone who could show up Monday morning and get the work done. I was desperate.
Why? But yes, but does that
No.
Do you have a bias that you think white men are more likely to show up?
No, it could be
on
any.
Monday morning?
It could be anybody, and and it literally could be anybody, and it actually turned out to be LGBTQ and a woman, the two that happened to show up for me,
Right.
And that's because of my network and my relationships and
Yeah.
people, things like that. But I don't want to lead you astray. By no means was that intentional.
Yeah.
That was, I needed people Monday morning
Right.
to show up and look like I had a team.
Well, and if you're talent pipelines, and if you have, so a good founder or a good agency owner, right? You already have the relationships. You have those
and you're
pipelines,
thinking about
right?
growth.
Yes.
This was it should not have been as much of a surprise to me as it was.
Well, exactly, right? Like, so you shouldn't be calling, and I'm not saying you did this, Bill, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to be calling your brother's, neighbor and saying, "Hey, do you got a kid that you can send over my way?"
Right.
No, I mean, you should have those pipelines should already be in place.
Should be thinking about that. Yes,
and we all know that there's great universities
and the
that
pipes you
should
open
have the
matter.
relationships.
That's the point. What pipes you open are really important.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. But again, I'm opening myself up to criticism. That's where I make the distinction between must have and nice to have in the early days. That's the mindset. Fortunately, I had multiple pipes open and I had thought about it. But I do worry and I do think about the small entrepreneur that wants to do things right. And does right begin with society, or does right begin with their client?
But see, I'm going to push back on that because I mean, just that your client is probably better served by having multiple voices in that room, so that you're not accidentally putting copy out that's unintentionally homophobic, and somebody comes back and says, yeah. So there's that, and there's also, nobody wants to be a token, and no one's asking to be a token, right? It's not like someone's saying, oh, just hire this like, no, what they're saying is be aware of your own unconscious biases that you may have in the hiring process. You may say, I need a corporate person. And in your head, you've decided what that corporate person looks like. Yes. And then someone else walks in the room and you immediately dismiss them. And not you. Absolutely. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think when we had this DEI conversation in 2020, which I did several in-depth pieces on this and spoke to a lot of leaders in our business, this unconscious bias was really where a lot of agencies were putting their resources, so that you're not missing great talent.
They were trying to unlearn.
Yeah. They were trying to unlearn. They were trying to unlearn their biases.
Right.
So that, when you are in that crunch and you're looking to hire, you're not overlooking great people, that you're not promoting the person who you like to golf with and overlooking the person who does probably maybe better work, but is out the door at 6:00 because, they have a family and they're not going to go to the golf course with you. So, I mean, those are the things that we're talking about here. Nobody wants to feel like a token.
No.
Nobody wants to feel like you're just going to doing them a favor. Like, no, I mean, people want to show up. They want to be high performers. It's just, they don't want to have to deal with the fact that, oh, no one considers me for this role because I don't look like this.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, ongoing, much more conversation to be had, and it's one of those conversations that needs to be had. And I worry that it becomes tired, and I don't want it to become tired. We need to keep innovating on what this means and how we apply it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So speaking of innovating, let's reflect on how we kind of innovated our podcast a little bit and how we approached interviewing guests. And Bill, like, I want you to, maybe you can start this by connecting it with something you heard recently.
So there's this podcast I listened to, The Pivot, Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway, and they had a recent conversation about Galloway on a different podcast interviewing RFK. And for those of you who don't know, Kara Swisher is a pretty prominent, true journalist. She started kind of on the newsroom floor, journalist, Times and other places. And Galloway's a professor. And Swisher, he asked for professional advice and said, hey, do you think I should have this RFK Jr. talking about conspiracy theories and whatnot? Should I have this guy on my podcast? And she said, no, absolutely not. And after some interesting banter, basically said, you're not ready for that. You're not, I'll put words in their mouth, not aggressive enough, or don't hold people to account strongly enough. And you kind of want to seek comedy, not comedy, but comedy with people. And I've noticed in the way we interview that owners have said things that I may or may not have thought were like fully true, but I didn't feel a need to follow up or challenge, because I have this belief that that's their truth, and if that's kind of what they think, I want to try to find common ground and understanding, and it takes more time. And maybe that's some of the coaching frame and coaching mindset. But I do think that I am vulnerable for leaving less than accurate sentiments on the podcast floor, and they probably could be clarified a little bit. So that's just an observation of the way we ask questions and the way we think about things, with owners when they say, well, everything's just wonderful here and everybody loves me, and we know that that may or may not necessarily be the case.
Well, one thing that I really like that you've said, and is that rather than like, you don't see it as your job to sort of point out some of their, fallacies in their thinking, but rather you want to ask those 2 or 3 follow-up questions so that maybe they would get there themselves, and
really
maybe
true?
They would have
Yeah,
this,
exactly.
Yeah. And I think that is approaching it like a coach, because I think it is much more powerful if they have that epiphany on their own. I, as you know, approach it much more like a journalist, where both a journalist and someone who loves good conversation. And I don't want to be bored by someone, tooting their own horn and not really contributing a vulnerability or something that where they're thinking about their listener. And listener, it could just be you and I, or it could be, more broadly
other
everyone,
owners, whatever, their team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I think I might come at it 2 ways. One is my journalist, where I just want to go right to like, is that really true? And then, and I try to have some restraint. I do when we're talking to guests, because, we're not trying to be, this isn't a journalistic platform in that traditional sense. It's really supposed to be cafe conversations. But even if I'm sitting in a cafe with them and they're just going on about, oh, everyone at my firm loves me, nobody ever leaves. And I'm like, is that true? Like, people leave. Like, that's a part of life.
Yeah. And we learn more. And that may be, and it could have a lot to do with format, our format and venue. I think we learn more in the grit, and we learn more, on the rough side. If you take a piece of wood and you rub the smooth side versus the rough side, you kind of learn more, you feel more, you experience more on the rough side than you do on the smooth side. And how we get there in a podcast and how we get there in a conversation is challenging, maybe because of the time constraint. But I do think we need to, and I want to give you permission. I think it's really important that if we see it and we feel it, we should say something about it, because that's a service to the listeners. So for them to because they're hopefully being honest with themselves and not saying to themselves, everybody loves me, this is a great place to work, and we're just killing it on all 6 cylinders. Hopefully nobody's ever saying that to themselves, even if it is true. Hopefully they're not saying that to themselves.
Well, so I like that, we learn more in the grit. I think there's so much truth there. Yeah. And I think that's part of, why, and maybe, I don't know, maybe we need to be more frank with people about that. Like, hey, like this is, but also from my previous role as a journalist, I am so aware that the face that a lot of founders, CEOs would give us, their point of view, did not align with what I heard from sometimes even that person's business partner, their leadership team, and definitely not the rank and file. And I've seen, and I think that's true, right? I think the version of them that we get is just not going to be the same one that their employees see. And I just want to make sure that is that point of view is at least given some sort of.
So is that right
airtime.
Or necessary to have those 2 things, or should there just be one self that shows up? Because basically what you're saying it's spin is what you're saying. And
yeah, to some degree it is.
Is I guess you need that. I guess politicians do it. All great corporate CEOs do it on earnings reports and earnings calls. But doesn't that truth reveal itself at some point in a bad way?
Yes. Well, hopefully, usually, like I read something that the quote that's like, you have to be comfortable with like not telling your side of the story, and just know that sort of in time it will come out. Yes, but like, so say somebody had, and I know this happens to agencies like regularly, right? Like there'll be a mass exodus, like maybe
Mm-hmm.
5 people will leave within like a 1 month or 2 month span, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a founder is going to come on here and talk about that. Now their teams know it, like their employees know it because they're living it. But I think it would be really brave for somebody to come on here and say, you know what, we made some bad decisions, resulted in losing a lot of high performers in a relatively short period of time. Maybe they would talk about that after they've, if that's well in the rear view mirror and they've rectified that and they can talk about that as a
Mm-hmm.
learning point. And I would really invite our guests to do that because if that feels safer to them.
Totally.
But sometimes we don't even get that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. And those are hard. I had a senior person leave Kith, the small firm, and I took it very personally. What did I do wrong? And it was nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. They needed to go take another job for what I ultimately found out was a very personal reason. And I could now talk about it, but upon reflection, there were things that I could have done differently. I certainly could have handled the exit interview differently instead of being the jerk that I was in the exit interview. Um, yeah, it is hard to be honest about your mistakes. Period. It is harder to be honest about your mistakes with strangers, you and I. It is harder to talk about your mistakes with strangers on a broadcast show.
Yes. Yes. And not knowing who is going to hear this, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, I mean,
but that's where we
found,
learn though. And so maybe it's on to the point is a warning to future guests, maybe scruffing up the surface of the board a little bit to get to some grit might be really worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are, these are storytellers that we have, right?
Yeah.
On our podcast. And some of them, it's like, like tap into that. Like, like how would you coach your client if they were going on this
and
podcast?
It's so compelling as an employee. That's the employer I want to work for.
Yeah.
The person that can say, yeah, we missed but this is what we did better. That's to me, I think, as opposed to I'm the greatest boss that's ever lived.
And if you're not making mistakes as a founder, then you're obviously doing something wrong, right?
Chances, like you're like growing.
Yeah,
maybe.
Or you're completely staying in you're staying in your comfort zone, or you're just not being honest with yourself, right? I mean, this is a journey in which it's high stakes, right? For most of these most founders.
And this is the reason I want to talk about this is that it's personal for me is because I'm selling the firm and stuff's getting looked at. And so spin won't, I mean, I can spin my firm wonderfully at a cocktail party, but when you got to look at a P&L and you got to look at clients and you got to look at this, that, and the other thing, there's not a lot of place to hide. And that's quite humbling.
But your the perception has value, right? I mean, that's why reputation matters so much, right? Because perception does matter. And if you can be perceived as being bigger, more successful than you are, I mean, the idea is maybe you would attract better talent. Maybe you would attract better clients. If you can come on a podcast like ours or, a panel at a trade show and kind of flex your muscles a little bit. The idea is, what is it? Fake it till you make it.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know for listeners, I don't know what they gain from that.
Oh, absolutely.
A better way to learn how to spin better.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Right. And
our down year was right sizing. They might learn some new vocabulary.
Oh, believe me, having read a zillion of these agencies of the years, I mean, after so much growth, we had a year where we decided to focus on investing back into the agency and slowing down.
Whatever.
And not to knock that, it's an effective strategy. I mean, as when I was on the other side of this, I bought it. But then you start seeing it consistently across many. Yeah.
So my question to you is it our job to let people share their story and be a platform for sharing their story? Or is our job to excavate the rough side of the board so that other owners can actually learn?
I think it's the latter.
Yeah. I think we need to do that. And I think I probably need to follow your lead, and we need to probably do that a little bit in a more thoughtful way. So I appreciate being able to talk about that.
Well, I appreciate your style of questioning, because I sometimes think that may be the more effective way, is if by kind of letting folks sort of come to their own realizations rather than, hitting them over the head with like, no.
Maybe that needs to be an experiment. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
No, it is. And it's good. I think where we're finding we're getting better. I think this is for both of us, how can we tell stories around methods, milestones, and mistakes so that people can say, oh, wow, I've never tried that. And if we get a little nugget from someone that maybe have gone before them, that's awesome. Or if someone says, oh, so I'm not the only idiot that thought that, that would be really great. That
totally
would be really great.
So wrapping up, this has been, Bill, these conversations just between us I think they're gold.
I love them. Hope, I know other people like them, but I just so value you, and I think this is it's fun. I think we're figuring out the heart and science. We're figuring out kind of what makes people tick, and I think if anything, we're just cheering for owners and making them better. Thank you for joining Aarti and I on the heart and science of creative leadership. Before we go, quick shout out to our production team, Brian Douglas and Brenna Yeary. Join us next time as we continue our conversations with owners of creative agencies, where we discuss their methods, milestones, and mistakes.